The reason why I want to tell the story about the bombings at Koeberg is because I like the truth and I want the truth to be heard. The bombings at Koeberg in December of 1982 made worldwide news and was covered widely in the international press. In 1995, after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission trials have concluded, the bomber could tell his story. As always, it was his side of the story. I only started working at Koeberg almost a decade after the bombings took place. I, however, worked closely and actually directly with many people that were present on the day of the bombings. I will make reference to an article in the Mail and Guardian from 15th of December 1995. The headline of the article reads, "How we blew up Koeberg and escaped on a bicycle." As usual in a mainstream media headline, it is completely false. As we all know, Koeberg was not blown up and the suspect did not escape Koeberg on a bicycle. Another article that I will reference is from the New York Times. The date is December 20th, 1982, and the headline is "Bombs Damage Atom Plant Site in South Africa." The person who claimed responsibility for the bombings was Rodney Wilkinson, an employee at Koeberg Nuclear Power Station. Rodney Wilkinson was considered a national hero for his bombing of the Koeberg Nuclear Power Station. The article reads, "The inside story of how the African National Congress made a mockery of atomic security to pull off one of the most dramatic coups of the apartheid struggle, blowing up the Koeberg Nuclear Power Station near Cape Town in 1982, has been told by the young couple who carried out the attack." They obviously could tell their story just subsequently to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings. The man who planted the bombs was a former South African national sword fighting champion, Rodney Wilkinson. He was backed by his girlfriend Heather Gray, a speech therapist whom he married soon after the bombing. Wilkinson penetrated the plant security to plant 4 limpet mines on the 2 reactor heads at the power station, as well as at strategic points under the control rooms. Now this is where the first problem comes in, because I will explain to you later on exactly where these bombs were planted and actually what damage they caused. The attack on the French-built nuclear installation, which it was suspected at the time would be used to produce plutonium for the construction of atomic bombs, was planned by the ANC Special Operations Department to avoid loss of life and risk of radioactive fallout. Now, just to state at this time that there was absolutely no way that any radioactive fallout could happen because there was no irradiated fuel on site. The bombs were detonated just days before the plant went on stream and nobody was hurt in the explosion and ensuing fire. Well, this is absolutely not true, because once you start loading new fuel into a reactor, you start a commissioning process which actually takes months to get the plant online. There's many tests that needs to be performed, and the plant definitely wasn't under fire at the time. There was no huge fire that had to be put out, so this is also fake news. Despite later denials by the South African authorities, the ANC established that the enriched uranium fuel had been moved to the plant but had not loaded it into the reactors. It was in dormant storage. The attack delayed the commissioning of the plant by about 18 months and cost the apartheid government an estimated R500 million. Now, the total cost of the damage, I'm not sure that anyone will ever know what that was. I can confirm that the delay was about 18 months before Unit 1 was commissioned. It was planned for Unit 1 to be commissioned first, but Unit 2 was subsequently commissioned first because it had the least damage. To continue, South African security suspected the operation was the work of a group of highly trained saboteurs, but in fact it had been carried out by a former corporal in the South African Defence Force who made his escape from South Africa on a bicycle. At least here they clarify, unlike in the heading, that his escape was made from South Africa on a bicycle, and it wasn't like a real escape where he's being chased down. He crossed the border on a bicycle after he was moved to the border far away from Koeberg by car. The Koeberg operation was born of chance in 1978. Wilkinson was living on a commune near Koeberg, like a hippie. The community ran out of money, and Wilkinson, who had studied building science, reluctantly took a job at the nearby nuclear plant, which was in the process of construction. Ironic that he actually needed to make a living off the place that he tried to destroy later on. Wilkinson worked for 18 months at the plant. Encouraged by his girlfriend Heather, he stole a set of Koeberg plans. The couple took them to newly independent Zimbabwe with the idea that they could be used by the ANC to launch an attack on the nuclear installation. So his girlfriend set him up to actually steal these plans. Now, just to make clear on what he was actually doing on the plant, he was recruited to plan out the plant itself in drawings for immediate actions that needed to be taken in certain events on the plant. So he was part of a process that would actually map out the plant and put this into specific documents so that people in future could use those documents to perform certain actions. So he would have had access to plant plans, and he would have had access to most of the plant facilities. The ANC, whose ranks had been deeply infiltrated by Pretoria spies and had recently had one of their own agents jailed on charges of nuclear espionage, was initially suspicious of the hippie who had pitched up on the doorstep claiming to have penetrated what was assumed to be the most secure installation in South Africa. After lengthy delays, during which the stolen plans were shown to Soviet and Western nuclear scientists for authentication, and Wilkinson himself vetted, the ANC invited him to carry out the attack himself. He was taken aback by the request but agreed and returned to South Africa. To his own surprise, he gained fresh employment at Koeberg with the task of mapping pipes and valves at the installation for use in case of emergency. The ANC appointed a guerrilla commander in Swaziland to act as Wilkinson's handler. There he and his handler thrashed out strategy designed to maximize embarrassment to the South African authorities while minimizing the risk to human life. They honed down possible targets to the 2 reactor heads, another section of the containment building, and a concentration of electric cabling under the main control room. Now here I can state that the cabling under the main control room he was sadly mistaken by, because I worked in this control room for many years, and it was not the main control room, it was the waste treatment control room, and he actually placed a limpet mine just outside the entrance to the waste treatment control room underneath a catwalk where there were many cables, and the catwalk still has a dent in it today from the explosion. So it certainly did cause damage and cabling that had to be fixed, but it was far away from the main control rooms, which I don't think he probably had access to, and he probably didn't even know where they were. The destruction of the hedge, which would be used to control the nuclear reaction, was to maximize the propaganda impact. He actually went and planted a limpet mine on the control rod driving mechanism, which is on top of the reactor head. It caused damage to the control rod driving mechanism, which had to be replaced, and obviously that is a huge setback. But none of the reactor heads that he tried to destroy got destroyed at all. In fact, you don't just find reactor heads on a shelf. They are very expensive, they take a long time to manufacture and forge, and Koeberg would not have been able to restart within 18 months if a reactor head was actually damaged by a little limpet mine. The other 2 targets were chosen to cause as much damage as possible. The date for the attack was set for December 16th, the day of the Covenant, which the ANC commemorated as MK Day in honor of Mkhonto Wesizwe. Wilkinson and Gray dug up 4 limpet mines packed with incendiary charges from a roadside arms cache in a remote area of the Karoo. Now this should send your hair standing up on the back of your head, because you need to think how many arms stashes are still out there in the country that MK never handed over after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission ended. Hiding them in wine box decanters in the Renault 5 that drove back to their Cape Town home in the suburb of Claremont, where they hid the devices in holes conveniently dug by their puppy Gabby. Now the demeanor of this article makes me wonder what the Mail and Guardian actually supports, whether they support terrorist activity and whether they support the severe damage that was caused to the Koeberg nuclear power station. From there, Wilkinson smuggled the mines one by one in a hidden compartment of the Renault through the perimeter security fence at the nuclear installation, depositing them in a desk drawer in his prefabricated office. From there, he had to carry them by foot into the main building through a security gate, hidden in his overalls. In November, the firm hiring Wilkinson informed him that they were laying him off at the end of the month, but then changed their minds and asked him to stay on another month. He turned the scare to advantage, telling them that in the interim he had taken another job and would have to leave on December 17th, thereby obtaining cover for his planned disappearance. As it transpired, Wilkinson did not make the target date of December 16th, but completed the operation the following day, a Friday, setting the fuses to a 24-hour delay so that they would explode on the Saturday. When he knew the target areas would be deserted, he was then forced to undergo a farewell party on the premises with his fellow engineers, mentally praying that the time fuses were not defective. Well, he was certainly lucky, because the fuses obviously proved that they were not as accurate as he would have hoped, because they actually detonated over a 12-hour period, so he was very lucky. He flew that afternoon to Johannesburg and was driven with a borrowed bicycle to a point near the Swaziland border, where he rode into exile. The bombs detonated, but not quite as planned. The springs on the firing mechanisms proved to have been brittle, and the devices exploded over a period of several hours instead of simultaneously. A few days beforehand, South African commanders had attacked supposed ANC targets in the Kingdom of Lesotho, killing 42 people, including women and children. Tambo claimed that the Koeberg attack was an act of retaliation carried out by a MK unit. Wilkinson flew on to Maputo, where he met Tambo in the ANC leader's office, the two men crying in each other's arms at their triumph. Gray, who had flown out of South Africa a week before the attack, this is his soon-to-be wife, joined Rodney there, and they flew to Britain, where they were married in Woodbridge, Suffolk. They continued working for the ANC after a period of isolation. Returning home followed the unbanning of the liberation movement and release of Nelson Mandela. As we know, he went to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and he was given a pardon for his action, as the terrorist acts were seen as political in nature. And he's a free man today. He's in fact a citrus farmer, and I think today, when he thinks back on what he did, he actually can't believe that he did that now. So to summarize, there's a few things that most of the mainstream media got wrong. Firstly, Koeberg didn't get blown up. There were 4 limpet mines placed on various areas on the plant. The plant security was not as tight at that stage because there was no irradiated fuel on site. In other words, there was no radioactivity that could actually be released to the environment. There was no nuclear safety threat. And they actually say in most of the articles that the ANC considered this when they acted. So another thing that they got completely wrong is the fact that they blew up the reactor heads, when they actually end up stating in the article that they knew with these big reactor heads it would be impossible to do much damage to them, and that they wanted to do maximum damage in other places. And the point I'm trying to make is that the mainstream media cannot be trusted with what they say. They cannot be trusted with their headlines, and I can time and time again prove this, and I will do that in the News Today articles that I'll be doing regularly. The mainstream media uses events to spread propaganda, and they use these events to achieve their objectives. And it is clear that the Mail and Guardian as an entity was in support of what Rodney Wilkinson did when he performed that terrorist act. Now, some of the people that worked with me directly at Koeberg, that was there on the day, said that we were lucky that there was no one around when these bombs went off. And many other things could have gone wrong because of what he had done. Besides the fact that he could have blown himself up, he actually tied these limpet mines to the inside of his legs, and carried it in his crotch, which for a man is absolutely crazy. But this is what he was willing to do to get the job done. And somehow he must have felt some kind of bravadery. I think there must have been some drugs involved too. He frequented the Koeberg club, so he knew a lot of the locals. They also knew his stances against the ANC government. He was very outspoken about that. And then for him to go and perform this act without anyone knowing that it was him, and subsequently no one actually knew after the event who had done it. They had no idea that it was a single person. They only found this out after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So I suppose there was quite an embarrassment. Now, to refer to the article, which is an international article from the New York Times, which came out a day after the attacks. It says that 4 bombs exploded today and Saturday at South Africa's only nuclear power station, which is under construction on the rocky Atlantic coast just north of Cape Town. The underground African National Congress, in a statement issued in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, said it was responsible for the attack on the station, which was not in operation. No one was injured in the bombings, the police said. The security police said tonight that the damage to the Koeberg power station was still being assessed, but that there was no danger from radioactivity to the population of Cape Town or workers at the site. Salute to our fallen heroes, the African National Congress described the bombing, which occurred in a staggered series over a 12-hour period. Remember, at the time they didn't know that one man had actually set these limpet mines. As a salute to our fallen heroes, the reference was to 30 members of the underground movement who were among the 42 people killed by South African forces in a preemptive raid on Lesotho 10 days ago. So you can see that the mainstream media news was very, very different to the Mail and Guardian article, which obviously came out much later after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And it just makes me think, you know, if you actually have people in government that put terrorists, that plan terrorist attacks, what are they actually doing in government? I don't see a place for any terrorist in government. Terrorists are good at planning terrorism. I don't think they're good at governing at all, and I think that our situation in South Africa proves my point. Please subscribe to my channel 00 Des to stay up to date with the latest postings.